Neither Russia, nor China, nor India, nor Brazil, nor the Republic of South Africa, nor the 5 new members of the BRICS organization, which should now be called the G10 or the Big Ten, were going to antagonize the collective West in the form of the G7, which should now be called the Little Seven, as we will tell you next. Initially, the BRICS association was created for more dynamic development of purely economic relations between the developing countries that joined it, rather than for confrontation with the West. Relations in our association are not based on subordinating the interests of all countries to any one country, as is practiced in the G7, but on an equal basis. Bilateral relations between BRICS countries are built on the basis of non-interference, equality and mutual benefit. However, the West perceives this organization as a challenge to itself and calls it an open enemy. Bloomberg published an article on January 8 with the title, "Enemies That Could Challenge the West's Sanctions Regime." Just how great is the arrogance of the West? They impose completely contrived and illegal sanctions in an attempt to force leaders of non-Western countries to obey some rules that essentially boil down to a demand. You must never utter the words, "This is my will, but you must do our will." And if the leaders of some countries dare to disobey and start to counteract, it turns out to be some kind of challenge to them. Well, if the West calls itself sad, now let it get in the back. After all, it was they who declared Russia, China, and now the entire BRICS organization as their enemy. Which means we'll have to be friends against them after all. Although our president has always stated that Russia and China, and of course all the other BRICS countries, are friends not against anyone, but in the interests of their peoples. However, it is now the interest of the peoples of the BRICS countries that we should be friends against the Western neo-colonialists and liberate the whole world from their dictates in all spheres in politics, arts, sports and others, and from their sanctions blows. And it would be even better if we threw those boa constrictors back around their necks and pulled them tighter, which I hope we do. Well, since we have become enemies, it is necessary to compare the GDP potentials of the West and our association in billions of dollars. G7 plus all EU countries. USA 25,463, Japan 5,702, Germany 5,310, France 3,770, UK 3,657, Italy 3,053, Canada 2,273. Total 49,228 billion. If we take the combined GDP of the entire West with other European countries, PPP GDP is 62,101 billion. BRICS plus CIS and SCO. China 30,327, India 11,875, Russia 5,327, Brazil 3,837, Saudi Arabia 2,150, Egypt 1675, Iran 1601, South Africa 953, United Arab Emirates 828, Ethiopia 347. Total 58,920 billion. Let us also include CIS countries Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Belarus, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Armenia, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. The list of CIS countries does not include Moldova and another neighboring country that is pro-Western. The SCO includes several countries already previously accounted for and plus Pakistan 1518. In total, our association gets a total of 62,034 billion in GDP. Thus, we see almost parity. And this parity has surely been broken by now, because I gave you the GDP calculations for 2022. And given the low economic growth in the G7 and EU countries in 2023, for example, the economy of the EU locomotive Germany is in recession, the UK economy is also in recession. And with the growth of non-Western economies, we think that the calculated total PPP GDP of our countries will become higher than that of the collective West. The sequel, as for the former G7 countries, the combined PPP GDP of the BRICS member countries surpassed their combined PPP GDP long ago. 49,228 billion versus 58,920 billion. Therefore, we can rightfully call this military political community the Little Seven, and the Little Seven the Little Seven. But that's not the worst of it for the small 7 countries. Let's see what the trade balance is for these countries. Here's the US trade balance in deep sadness, consistently in a huge minus. Here's Japan's trade balance in a less deep but sad, mostly in the negative. Here's Germany's trade balance, so far in the plus side, but that's temporary, just for now. This is France's trade balance in deep sadness, in a large and steady minus. That's the UK trade balance in great sadness, in a significant stable minus. As you can see, 4 countries out of 7, including the US, have trade balances in deep sadness, in significant minus. For comparison, I will also give the trade balances of BRICS countries. Here is China's trade balance is consistently positive. Here is India's trade balance is negative. but it is negative because of buying a lot of resources from Russia and Saudi Arabia, which is generally not critical for India. And it's fixable. Russia's trade balance is consistently positive. This Brazilian trade balance is also consistently positive. This is Iran's trade balance is consistently positive. That's Saudi Arabia positively as well. This is the United Arab Emirates positively. South Africa is generally positive as well. Here is Egypt's trade balance is consistently negative. This is Ethiopia's trade balance, also consistently negative. We see that only 3 of the 10 countries that make up the BRICS have trade balance problems. But these problems are fixable. It is only necessary to help these countries to realize their industrial and agricultural potential, to create conditions for more successful and faster development, i.e. to increase exports, which will be facilitated by their accession to BRICS. Returning to the countries of the small 7, we note that they have been doing quite well until now, mainly due to the fact that all other countries of the world accept their currencies, which the countries of the West can print according to their needs and are able to buy all sorts of resources, goods and products with them all over the world. Can you imagine such a thing? The Russian government issued debt securities, the Russian central bank printed several hundred billion rubles, bought these securities from the government, and the Russian government bought machine tools and equipment in the United States with these freshly printed rubles. No, there's no such thing. But the reverse process is still possible and underway. This is why these countries can afford such a large imbalance in trade, and therefore a higher standard of living for their citizens. After all, they have in their hands so far valuable for the world and unlimited resources in the form of dollars, pounds, sterling, euros and yen, which they do not have to extract in the harshest conditions of the Arctic, but can create with a magic wand by pressing a few keys on a computer keyboard. To maintain their privileged position, the system of neocolonialism, the US and Europe unleashed a proxy and sanctions war against Russia. And so far only sanctions against China, while simultaneously intimidating the rest of the world with their sanctions. But with the emergence of 5 new member countries in the BRICS alliance, it became clear to the whole world that neither US threats nor the sanctions war scared anyone. And 3 commodity giants, Iran, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, have joined the association. And in addition to them, there are many other commodity countries in the Sudden Bloc. Also in line to join BRIC are several other commodity giants: Venezuela, Algeria, Morocco, Qatar, Kuwait and others smaller but no less important. Well, if we remember that many high-tech enterprises of the US and Europe were carelessly transferred to non-Western countries, mainly to Asian countries, take into account that China actively copied these Western technologies and developed its own, that Russia has a huge scientific, design and engineering potential and is actively substituting Western technologies, as well as the fact that most of the most diverse resources are under the control of non-Western countries. It is safe to say that the collective West will fail. And for me, the answer to that question, BRICS versus G7, who is the future for? BRICS is definitely the future. What will be the defeat of the West? In that the ability of Western countries to rip off the world and buy their resources, goods and products with their currencies will diminish. That is, the welfare of the citizens of these countries will also be reduced. But the main task of the BRICS remains the de-dollarization of the world to put the US in its place. Make it merely a regional power of the North. How quickly the world will be able to get rid of dollar dominance is hard to predict, but it can be seen that China is preparing for something and is getting rid of US debt securities quite actively. I note that Russia got rid of them a long time ago. Between October 2021 and October 2023, they got rid of $300 billion worth of treasuries. And according to October data, the amount of US debt securities they now hold is $769 billion. Well, while you and I, as spectators in the stands, having collected seeds, can snap them and watch with excitement. So our association will slowly but steadily cover the 3-story, delayed effect of the sanctions. West. BRICS versus the Little 7. It will be a glorious battle. Subtitles by Dima Torok.